Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear so that you know what is or isn't worth spending your hard-earned money on. Is the Manix 2 from Spyderco the very best EDC you could buy? Well, I think it's pretty damn close, and that's kind of what I was going for when I purchased it. So let's break it down and see if it lives up to the hype. The Recon 1, my longtime 8-year companion that I kept in my pocket pretty much anywhere when I was doing anything, whether it was just walking around grocery shopping or going in the woods, beating it on stuff I should not have been beating it off of. But through all of that use and abuse, whether it was legitimate or just for my own amusement, it has worn down to the point where it does need some replacing. So we got the Manix 2 from Spyderco. A little bit smaller, a little less tactical looking, a little less scary when you open it up at work or at a Christmas gathering to open something up. The Manix 2 does not give me quite as many stares, but it can still do just as much, and it can probably hold up to just about as much as the Recon 1. Last thing I'll say before we dive any further into the specs on this knife is that when I had this knife, this was the only thing I carried on me for the most part. I had a few Leathermans and a few odd multi-tools, and I've lost most of those, and I don't carry them too often. So I just carried this for the most part for that 8-year period, and I wanted to replace it with a folding knife, fixed blade, and a small little multi-tool. For the type of work I do and the type of work I plan on getting into, it's just there's a lot of situations where you do need certain tools, and I figured, hey, why don't I spend some time doing some research and figure out exactly what the best combination would be for me and for what I do. And I think this combination would cover a lot of people's needs, and it's probably overkill for what most people do in their day-to-day, and it's probably overkill for mine, but it's hey, if you like knives and you like carrying them, what's the harm? And it's there if you need it, and if you do ever run into one of those situations where you do need your knives and you break one, that 2 is 1, 1 is none philosophy, but argue with it if you will, but I think it's a pretty strong thing to live by. Size comparison to the Recon 1, definitely makes the Recon 1 look like a monster. And as I buy more folding knives, I'm understanding now. I couldn't really get it in my head. The Recon 1's not that big, is it? Yeah. The Manix 2's a relatively large folding knife, but the Recon 1 makes it look pretty manageable. There's the Benchmade 940, almost identical if in length, basically the same length. Very similar blade steel and handle materials, but certainly quite a bit smaller. Definitely about a little bit thinner, certainly less beefy in the pocket. And there's the rat number 1. You got a fairly large knife in this Manix 2. It's certainly not as big as you can get, and really the overall profile of the knife makes it seem a lot larger than it really is because of that typical Spyderco thickness due to the spider hole, giving it a little extra girth in the pocket. Now the most similar thing to this is pretty much the Paramilitary 2. It's a little bit different in its build. It's hard to argue with the fact that the ergonomics are just better on the Manix 2. It's a little bit less blocky. It's cut out a little bit better for your hand in just about any position that you could put it in, where the PM2 is a little bit blockier, although still one of the most comfortable and one of the most highly praised folding knives in existence. In the end, when selecting this EDC folding knife, it was between the Manix 2, the Paramilitary 2, which I will get soon, and the other big close runner-up was actually the Osborne, the 940-2 from Benchmade. When I was trying to make this decision, I did not think I was going to have a YouTube channel, so I wasn't looking to get multiple knives that cost me a couple $100s. It wasn't in the budget at the time. I didn't really think I'd have a purpose for them. Now I found an excuse, so I also got the 940-2, but this was close to the running for this. I just figured between these two, this is a sturdier knife. It's much thicker, much heavier. I prefer to feel that extra weight in my hand because I might do some more aggressive things with this. This is still quite sturdy, the Benchmade 940-2. So Spyderco's ball bearing lock is a pretty cool design, more or less trying to improve on the Benchmade Axis lock. That's just a random statement. Don't take that seriously. Benchmade's Axis lock's been around for a while. It's pretty awesome, but it's got some flaws. The Omega springs are kind of weak, and it's one of the main reasons that I decided not to go with a Benchmade as my first expensive, more high-quality knife looking for my replacement EDC. The Spyderco ball bearing lock is blocked by this backspacer. So if I show you the inside of this Benchmade 940-2, you can see the Axis lock, right? See that bar sliding as I pull those two knobs back, knobs, and the blade closes, and then when you open it, you'll see that lock snap behind that blade. Tang. Right there. So, open, blade falls, right? Boom, easy. Same exact thing with the Manix 2, except there's a little ball bearing. So if you picture yourself slinging a ball bearing through a slingshot, that is propelled forward by that nasty little coil spring, which is a lot heftier than those little Omega springs. So I feel pretty confident in this, which is why I went with this as opposed to that axis lock. But glowing reviews across the board for the ball bearing lock from Spyderco. This does sort of feel like a toy compared to a lot of the knives that I tend to carry, whereas the Manix 2 definitely feels like a work tool. This is a rugged piece of gear. For blade length, we have technically what is a 3.375 inch blade, but you're looking at just about 3 inches, a little bit less than 3 inches of full cutting surface there, because you've got this super nice finger choil at the front. You will find most people who enjoy this knife will tell you it is well worth losing that little bit of cutting edge to have the super precise control you get from being able to choke up into that forward choil position. And the overall length is 8 inches, which is pretty long, but still not too bad, especially when you're used to carrying a 9-inch Recon 1 in your pocket. So the weight of the Manix 2 comes in at 5 ounces, which I'll tell you, when you put this in your hand, it really kind of feels like it's heavier than that. The Recon 1's 5.3 ounces, and it's spread over a little bit larger of a surface, but this feels lighter. I mean, it does. When you get this in your hand, it feels like you're holding a big hunk of metal, which for the most part, due to the full stainless steel liners in there, it's a pretty heavy knife. But still, at 5 ounces, I don't really notice this in my pocket. If the weight is an issue for you, then you can go down to the lightweight version, which has got the FRN handles. I think it's an FRN handle. It's got BDN1 steel instead of the S30V. I think you can get it in like S90V, S110V. I want to say Rex 45 or one of those Rex in a sprint run, but it's, yeah, more or less BDN1 is the lightweight version, which is not quite as good of a steel, but say a little more stainless, I think, and easier to sharpen, and there's some pros and cons to both. But I'm going to get a lightweight version, I think, at some point of this, because I really do enjoy this version of it, and if I could throw a lightweight version on in a pair of shorts, if I'm going for a hike or something, might be a little bit more convenient to carry than this, because it does weigh down a pair of, say, athletic shorts or something like that. Cargo shorts should be fine. If you want to go up in size, you can get the Manix 2 XL version, which comes in, I think, a couple different varieties. And then there's, of course, the 5-ounce version of the original Manix 2, which is the ball bearing lock. Originally, it came with a back lock years ago, and there was the Manix 1 before it. This is the black G10 satin finish. This is the standard vanilla version, and you can get this in a few different colors, I believe. And then there's the black on black, and then there's the S90V, S110V, 30p. What else? It comes in a few different steels and a few different sprints of various different sprint models, various different colors if you want to go in the secondary market. But this is the probably the most common one you're going to find. Steel of this one is the S30V, which is your standard Spyderco and Benchmade and a lot of high-end knives standard go-to steel. So CPM S30V steel. It's worn down a little bit so far. This is just the satin finish. Some of the knives come in a DLC coating. There's a black on black version of this, which will be that black G10, I think black pocket clip, and definitely a black DLC coating over that S30V. If you are unfamiliar with S30V, there's Blade HQ's steel chart. That if you haven't seen that article, go check it out on bladehq.com. They've got a really awesome article that goes through all your common steel types and gives you the attributes of each. You've got pretty damn good edge retention in the S30V. Not the toughest, but it doesn't really need to be for the type of stuff you tend to do with a folding knife. If you need toughness, you go to a fixed blade with some kind of high carbon steel, and the high carbon steel is not stainless, but you can beat on it. But the idea is to keep this as sharp as possible and keep a fairly good edge on it. I'll still beat on it, but I want to be able to use this as my main kind of beating tool if I have to use stuff for non-knife tasks, and if I want to use something that's going to be a little more of a slicer, I want to keep this as slicey as possible. Now I'm cheating here because I know that I just touched this up with the blade medic a couple days ago at work when I was bored in the office, and I stropped it up when I got home, and I did check it, so I know this. I don't know if it's push cutting sharp, but it's definitely, no, it might not be push cutting sharp. No, I got to do some work to get it back to that, because when this thing first came out of the box, you could just carve whatever you wanted through paper. It was unbelievable. But you can see from the wear and tear I put on this, if you ever had a new Spyderco knife, you'll know that my edge right here is a little bit shorter on the sharpened portion than what you typically see. The factory edge was so beautiful off this, it's really hard to mimic, and I know I'll never get it back to that. Maybe one day I'll get like a nice fancy Apex rig or something and I'll put some work in, but I like going through the suffering of sharpening on whetstones. So if I can sharpen on whetstones and get something sliced relatively well, especially after I had this pretty pretty dulled out to the point where it definitely, well, it was doing that. It wasn't slicing paper, it was just ripping and tearing. And I had a bit of a nick there that was giving me quite a hang up. So I'd get here and then it would tear. But, well, as you can see, it's certainly got a little bit more of a slice and edge back to it now. So if I can just keep that up with a little bit of blade medic work or a little bit of, stropping once in a while. The only downside of this is there's no sharpening choil. So the idea being that you don't have to worry about catching that when you're starting your cut. But if you're not in the forward position and you start your cut with that forward choil or you miss that, you're not going to get a great slice. If you're holding that in that forward choil position and you want to start doing some slicing, that is, oops, bad one. The handle scales on this are G10. Again, they've got full stainless steel liners in there. Quite tough. Nice, thick, heavy backspacer in there. And the rest of it's a blow-through design, so it makes for pretty easy cleaning when you need to get the pocket lint and dirt and or a lot of tree needles and leaves and that kind of stuff in my case. So you've got T8s for the body and for the pocket clip screws, and a T10 for the pivot. So the G10 handles you're looking at here, the same material that's on the Recon 1 handle, and also the same material on the 940-2. So all just different texturing, the very much aggressive pattern on the cold steel versus the very smooth pattern on the Osborne 940, and the Manix 2 is right in between that with a very fine texturing, but it's still very grippy. And I don't, Nick Shabazz says it best, you will not lose this knife if you are working in the Vaseline factory. Yeah, so you're looking at a very fine textured pattern on that G10, so you're getting quite a good grip on that without it actually tearing your pockets up. And I'm not one for using lanyard holes on my pocket knives for the most part, but there is a gigantic lanyard hole here if you ever wanted to get some anything through that and attach it to something, or just throw a little tail on there for a little extra grip. That lanyard hole, however, does prevent you from being able to fully take the knife apart without having to do some major prying and risking damaging the knife, but this is very much not designed to be taken apart. The buttery smooth action of this knife is brought to you by some phosphor bronze washers, which are nice at pushing dirt out, which is good for someone like myself who's pretty much always going to be getting their knives dirty and full of lint and needles and such. So phosphor bronze is pretty damn slick for me. So long as it's functional and it remains functional under hard conditions, then that's all I'm looking for. On the blade itself, there's the Spyderco trademark inlaid there, which is pretty shallow inlay, but it seems to hold up quite well, but it's not deep enough that it's going to really compromise your knife too much. The big compromising portion, of course, is this upper part of the spider hole. That spider hole allows for great deployment, but comes at the cost of some stability. So if you pry with this knife, you're probably going to snap it right around this area. Below that, you've got Spyderco CPM S30V. The steel will be printed just below that Spyderco name. And on the other side of the blade, you've got Eric Glesser's signature, the son of the founder of the Spyderco company and the maker of this knife, the creator and designer of this knife. And then there's Golden, Colorado, USA Earth, which is super fun. If aliens find this knife in the future, they're going to know what planet they got this knife from. So the cutting edge, this is a full flat grind, the typical Spyderco full flat grind, which is going all the way consistently down from a relatively thick blade stock compared to at least the Paramilitary 2 and a lot of Spydercos. It's pretty thick out to the tip, but it does taper down to a pretty fine cutting edge. As far as thickness behind the edge goes, you're looking at 0.13 inches, so it's going to be pretty thin and pretty slicey at the edge, even though you're coming from such a thick blade stock. The edge itself's got a little bit of a bevel to it. Like when you're sharpening this, it's not as easy as you might think it should be for a full flat grind like this, but once you're going along, you have to sort of rock a little bit if you want to keep your contact on that edge. And if you put a little bit of a marker line on the cutting edge when you're sharpening, you can see that if you don't rock it the right way as you're going across there, you're not going to hit that full belly like you want to. But beautiful blade profile. When I was looking through all the different knives that I was going to potentially pick up and all the different Spydercos, this appealed to me a lot more than the more clip pointish style of the Paramilitary 2. And yeah, this thing is a slicing machine. And all the different places you can put your hand, I'll talk about the ergonomics more later, but this is just, it makes it so easy for you to follow through, especially with the forward position of that blade relative to the handle. If you look at the Recon 1, it's fairly straight from the back of the knife to the blade. If you look at the Manix 2, you can see that it's got a little bit of a forward curve towards the front of the knife from the base of the handle. So for the use and abuse rating so far on this knife, I'm going to give it a 3. Pretty much the same as the Izula II. I've had it in my pocket nonstop for the last 10 months or so, and Both knives have gotten to see a little bit of damage and a few scratches, but a few scratches on the blade don't really mean that much to me compared to the other the damage that I've accumulated on my gears. You will see the use and abuse rating climb drastically over the next few months as I continue to wear on these knives. In the 3 weeks since I filmed the Esee Izula II video, this has already probably quadrupled the amount of wear and tear and use and abuse that it has seen. Keep your eyes open for the updated reviews of these knives, as these will be my main carries for the foreseeable future. I have to talk quickly on the aesthetics and the overall presentation of this knife. This is a much more peaceful, calm knife than my old carry companion, so I can say so far I've not gotten any really awkward stares from this, other than, hey, that's a big knife, that's kind of shiny, let me see that, versus the, oh my god, put your knife away, that looks like a weapon, which isn't what I'm going for, especially in Canada, where if you're carrying a knife and it looks like a weapon, you might be asking for trouble with the law. So that's not really something we can use for an excuse. Your knife better look like it has a purpose for work and or something along those lines. It's a little bit big for what most people will use and for what most people prefer to carry, but other than that, the spider hole, looks kind of silly, and really the thing that turned me off of them, I'd never even put them on my radar because I did not want that stupid hole in my pocket. It just looked dumb. Metal Complex says it looks like a wounded pelican, and I get it, but it's functional and it's not made to look pretty. It is a fantastic design, which was built entirely as a work knife and not for a pretty showpiece. It is definitely very fidget friendly, and it is kind of pretty if you can appreciate Spyderco, but it is meant to be a knife that is built for function, and any aesthetic stuff they could do was just a bonus afterwards if it fit with the, again, the functionality of the knife. I can't seem to locate it at the moment, but I did try another pocket clip because I'm not a huge fan of the satin one, only because it shines, and if you're out in the sun, that thing's just saying, hey, look at me. But I did end up catching it on a door archway or something like that within the first 3 days I was carrying it, and I didn't mind it. It was a deep carry black clip, just a cheap $15 one I picked up off Amazon. It's not worth buying it. I need to buy a Casey Lynch clip or something that everyone recommends so I can get something that's black. Deep carry would be nice. I'm not that concerned about it because, again, I'm not trying to conceal it, but the only real aesthetic change I would like on this would be a little less flashy of a pocket clip. And I don't want to conceal this. I don't want it to be concealed because that will make it look like it's a weapon. And again, in Canada, that would make this illegal to carry. But nothing wrong with the satin clip. It does match the knife. Beautiful looking knife. Ambidexterity, which was really the reason why I purchased this one over many of the other knives. It is a fully ambidextrous knife, and I mean that in the most ambidextrous of ways. There's nothing that you can do left-handed on this knife that you can't do right-handed, and vice versa. So as a left-handed individual, I appreciate a knife that can be completely ambidextrous. So the compression lock of the PM2 and the Shaman and the different Spydercos I was looking at, it's tempting, but I just wasn't sure at first if I'd want to go through this whole process of using the thumb. As I've learned more about it, doesn't seem that bad, but the ball bearing lock of the Manix 2 is just, it's fully ambidextrous. There's no issue using either hands. Of course, you're going to be better with your dominant hand. I don't use my right hand a lot, so it takes a little bit of practice, but the ball bearing lock is just perfect. Pocket clip is tip up only, which is fine because most people like myself would not want to carry it tip down. Everything else is completely symmetrical and ambidextrous. So Southpaw approved knife, I'd say abso-freaking-lutely. Great job, Spyderco. Great job, Eric Glesser. Lefty approved for sure. So to talk a little bit more about the use, the functionality, the capability of this knife, the S30V blade steel has impressed the shit out of me so far, and I can say firsthand I am a believer in this whole CPM super steel business. And yes, I'm aware that S30V is not that super of a steel if you're big into like M390 and 20CV and all the big fancy shiny stuff. Nonetheless, it's pretty cool, very functional. It's definitely a little bit more work to sharpen than I'm used to, but it's not that bad, and I'm getting more used to it. Haven't had to sharpen it too much yet, but I have got some practice just for the sake of experimentation. The S30V is great, but you certainly wouldn't want to have to touch it up in the field if you took a big chip out of it. That's really the big limitation with S30V. You're going to want to avoid chipping it off of stuff and avoid hitting rocks and anything too hard, because to do a field touch-up with that kind of a chip in this is going to ruin your day and or days. It carries quite nice though for the size of it, and again, it feels quite a bit heavier than it really is at 5 ounces. I've had this as my primary carry in my left pocket for the last 10 weeks, whether I'm wearing jeans, sweatpants, shorts, or my work pants, which are just your 511 tactical. strike pants. The deployment of this is really just a dream, and the spider hole, I'm understanding, is patented and so popular for a reason. You just don't miss that thing most of the time. It's really, really easy to get your thumb dug in there. Although I gotta say, the first day that I had this, breaking it in, which I played with it a lot more than I needed to, I kind of pulled my thumbnail off of my thumb, just doing the thumb flick so many times, and I just cut my nails a couple days before, and I ended up doing non-stop spider flicking for the first week while I let my thumbnail reattach to my thumb. So just be careful. The inside of that spidey hole is quite sharp. It was even sharper right out of the factory. Could have been knocked down a little bit more, but at the same time, if you're wearing gloves or if you're in a wet environment, it grips that much better if you're just trying to get a deployment off that really quickly. Which you probably shouldn't ever have to do it in a really quick situation like that, like say a bear is attacking you or whatever. But if that happened, I certainly would not want to be fumbling on whatever I'm carrying, and that's normally a decision I make when I'm purchasing a knife. Hey, maybe it's not that big of a possibility for you, but I am in the woods enough, and I have had a few interesting wildlife encounters. Nothing crazy, life and death or anything like that, but enough to make me check on my gear and make sure I was carrying enough to say if I did get attacked by the coyote that was looking at me funny, or the black bear that I knew was just off yonder in the bushes, kind of making aggressive sounds, I'd like to know that whatever I had on me is going to deploy, which I'll normally have a fixed blade in that situation, not a folding knife, but you get the idea. I want it to work when I need it. Many different ways of deploying this knife, though. Your typical thumb open like a normal human being if you don't have to be flashy. I got a buddy of mine who only opens his knives with two hands. He's my age. He's not that old, but he opens his knife like an old man. Sorry, friend. Thumb flick. Ooh, failed thumb flick. Actual thumb flick. Reverse flick slash spider flick. Spider hole, Spyderco, spider flick. Haha. Spidey drop. Than that, this isn't super broken in yet, but you can give it a little reverse flick if you, for some reason, you were drawing this on your offhand and or needed to deploy it for some kind of a quick reason. That's really just tactical sort of way of deploying it, and it's kind of dangerous because you don't want to drop it and throw it at your foot and impale yourself in the toe. Probably sever a toe if that hits, so yeah, be careful. Reverse deploying, not the smartest thing in the world. I did it with the Recon one because I lost the other pocket clip, so I draw it reversed and I could give it a flick. But as you can see, it doesn't always open perfectly, and don't whip it open and cut your knuckles off. But there is some function to it, as the more you practice deploying and opening your knives in various situations, if you did ever fumble your knife and you had to get it open in a hurry, you actually had somewhat of an ability to do that without cutting yourself, hopefully. But again, fiddle with your knives safely, start slow, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, don't do anything stupid, and definitely don't blame me for it if you cut yourself. Speaking of which, when I broke this in the second day that I had the 940-2, I went to do a reverse flick, and it wasn't broken in, and my finger slipped getting used to this, and I did nick myself. But that was about 6 days ago, and it's pretty much healed. Nice sharp knife, no big deal. You nick yourself once in a while, you live and you learn. Just try to avoid your arteries if you can, and don't cut your friends. And if you're the type of person who needs that kind of warning, then please stop watching this channel and do not affiliate with me whatsoever. For tension wise in the pocket clip, when you're deploying this and putting it back in, that spoon clip is perfect. You'll not miss that if you're grabbing that. Your finger gets in there, bloop, knife comes out, right to the thumb, easy deployment, right back in the pocket. I've done lots of practice drawing and deploying and all that stuff with this knife in different situations, and I try and after I'm doing my workouts or playing around with some sticks, or I'll just try to get my heart rate up, and then I'll work on my deploys just to make sure the dexterity's there. And really, this is the easiest folding knife to get out of your pocket and into action as quick as possible. Ergonomics, comfort, precision of use, all that stuff. Oh, this is the best. This is the most comfortable thing in the world. I look forward to the knife that I find that is more comfortable in the hand than this, but you listen to so many reviews of people talking about it, and you think, oh my god, blow up this Manix 2 a little bit more, why don't you? But it's not even blown out of proportion. The comfort and the ergonomics of this knife are pretty freaking amazing. The forward choil and thumb ramp make this just about the most comfortable thing ever. If you have to do some fine stuff, even sharpening on I touched this up the other day when I was sitting at the office board on the Landscape Blade Medic, and I was sharpening from that forward choil position, and it was actually extremely comfortable, and it surprised me quite a bit. So it's got grip pretty much everywhere. So even if you wanted to choke way back on this, you got a really good grip on that with the pocket clip and with the little bit of jibbing you're going to get in the base of the handle, along with the G10, which is quite nicely textured and very grippy. I played around with this in gloves as well, and it deploys just fine, it handles just fine, and the ergonomics transfer just fine with gloves on. I won't beat this to death like a lot of people do because it's been done so many times, but I will just say the jimping on this is so genius because it does in fact push back towards your finger or thumb. So when you're pushing forward, that jimping's actually biting backwards into you, but it doesn't hurt. It's not aggressive in the way that it's going to tear your skin off unless you got weak skin or dry skin on your thumb like me. But it's very, very, very grippy, and it just sits you right in the perfect position where you don't even have to think about where to put your thumb. It locks you into place in a way that I've not felt in a knife before. And hearing people talk about it, I thought, big deal. No, I get it. It's actually a big deal. Precision of use. I love spear points because of this exact precision of use. And for the Recon 1, you can get on here pretty good and make a pretty precise notch or something with the tip of your knife, but it's not as perfect or precise as this, where the forward curve of the blade kind of goes with your thumb. Ooh, sorry, table. You can really get in there, and it's perfect to do some fine whittle work or anything like that. Field reliability, we're still going to find out, but my biggest concern with this was the fact that it had small moving parts in it, which for me, going from the triad lock, which is more or less just a solid piece of steel and a solid piece of steel and not a whole lot of flash in between, I was really nervous about going to something this mechanical. But I've read a lot of reviews, and there really isn't many cases of people having issues with their ball bearing lock. I know people don't tend to break them, but you really don't hear a lot of issues with that big bad coil spring that's on the inside of that. And underneath those black plastic, which it's a rugged plastic, I don't have an issue with that. Seems pretty solid. I'm sure it's there for friction or for a reason, lack of wear and tear. That's a steel ball bearing. Inside of there, a round sphere. I don't know much about physics, but I know a sphere is a pretty solid shape, and that lock is about as solid as can be. And with that ball bearing lock, I've got no complaints so far. It's super easy to maneuver. It's definitely got more spring to it. It's definitely harder to pull back than the ball bearing locks I mentioned before. Man, that's still got some snap to it. I got to break that in more. But that's weak. It feels flimsy, and it feels like I can break that. That feels more like a toy. This feels like, man, I don't see that wearing down over time too much. And it's going to break in more, but I mean, that really feels like a solid piece of gear inside of there. And there's not a lot of bad stories about this. It's designed never to have to be really taken apart. They obviously don't want you to do that. I don't think this one's going to have the red Loctite the older models would have had, but I don't really plan on taking this apart unless I do something stupid to it. Which, hey, that's probably going to happen. So we're going to find out how well this thing does in the field, because I do plan on carrying this as my primary knife for the foreseeable future. Yeah, the sharpening is a big drawback, though. Again, that S30V, it's not the hardest to sharpen, but in the field, if you're just trying to touch it up, yeah, I mean, I did quite a nice job, I feel anyways, with the Lansky Blade Medic here, where it's, hey, well, we're going to be doing decent enough if we're out in the bush and it's going to pop a few hairs off. Anything I need to cut in the bush will be perfectly within reason with this knife. Sharpening ability, if I can do that with the Lansky Blade Medic in 10 minutes, it's not that big of a deal. As far as maintenance, cleaning, all that kind of stuff goes, a little bit of water even to spray through there and you'd be fine. You'd be able to keep this fairly clean. Drop a little bit of oil in the pivot once in a while if you do happen to put a lot of water and clean it and get it full of lots of grit and dirt. But there's not a lot of maintenance to this knife. If it comes apart, that's an issue, and it's a folding knife. So to some extent, folding knives are always going to be more susceptible to damage and malfunction than a fixed blade. So if you need something in the woods for survival, you're better off with something that is a full solid piece of steel. But hey, as far as folding knives go, it's not a triad lock cold steel. And hey, I'm not saying that's the best in the world, but it's definitely a fairly reliable folding knife if you are going to have to rely on something in a worst case scenario situation. This seems like it's going to do pretty well though, so I'm excited to see over time what this thing does and what it can hold up to. And it's small ninja time. Here we go into the fun stuff. So the defensive capabilities. What do we do if we need to pull this out in an emergency situation? And by this I mean wildlife attacks only, because in Canada we do not defend ourselves against people, and if you do carry a knife for self-defense, then you are asking for trouble, because that is illegal, and this is a work tool. I'm only talking about this hypothetically in the context of a wildlife attack or anything crazy like that, where I am using this work tool or carrying this work tool, or it's within my reach and I reactively grab it and manage to defend myself against a wildlife attack. So let's say I'm going into my local supply store and I'm just going to pick up a plunger or some dynamite or whatever, and I run into a coyote. Well, if I had to pull this knife out quickly, in my little tests anyways, without the rapid adrenaline surge of an actual conflict of life or death, I can say I've had no problem drawing this knife. And I deploy this thing and draw it just for fun. I don't know how many dozens of times during the day, and I don't know how many times I fumble it, but it's a fraction of what I used to fumble the Recon 1 when I was trying to open it, because sometimes that triad lock's not the most friendly for a quick deploy or function. But this is smooth as can be, so I really feel like in a panic situation, I'm so dialed into the function of this knife after just a few weeks, months, I guess. It's I really feel like having this in my pocket for several years, it'll just become more and more of a reflex for me to want to grab this in a hurry. Which again, not that I would primarily do that, but I work in the woods a lot, and wildlife self-defense is an actual possibility that I know people who've had closer encounters than I've had, and I tell you, you'd rather have something than not. It's very comfortable if you're moving through like general, say, the Filipino martial arts type motions. The forward curvature of the blade makes it extremely functional. Kind of lead with your thumb and push through most of your cuts. And it's very, very slicey. It's not quite as long as you might like if you wanted to get a lot of long cuts done, but the penetration's great. And really, again, if you had to do some slicing with this, the forward curve is really going to help carry that cutting edge through. And would I call this an apocalypse knife? Is this a knife you would want to bring with you to the end of the world? Well, really, it's a better choice than a lot of the things you're going to grab out there, but I gotta give it a no, because look at the mechanics that are going on in there. If something happens, that spring explodes, and or ball bearing goes flying, and or you lose the parts, or you don't have the tools to take this apart and deal with it, you're screwed. I don't like the idea of mechanics and pivots and things that can break, so no, gotta give it a no for the apocalypse knife. But if you had to have a folding knife for the apocalypse, oh, this has got to be top 10 for sure. And I'm sure, hey, we'll do that video without a doubt. Your top 10 maybe folding knives for the apocalypse, because most people aren't going to choose a folding knife. But hey, if you had to have one, let's talk about what the best one would be. So last, but definitely not least, we have the final hog rating of this knife. So how hard on gear approved is this knife? I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. That's a pretty damn good rating for a folding knife. Picked what I thought would be one of the best hard use type folding knives that I could get. There's plenty of great testimony out there of people who've used the Manix 2s for years and have had no issues with them, or very few issues, and I can't wait to see how this thing holds up as the years go on. But an 8.5 out of 10 for the hog rating of this folding knife. This will definitely be one of the top considerations for the knife giveaway I'll be doing once this channel reaches its 1,000 subscriber mark, so help me get there so I can give one of these knives away. And I gotta say, if I had to take a guess right now, it's probably going to be a Manix 2 or an Esee Izula II, but we'll see and keep our minds open to the possibility of change as time goes on. But awesome knife, super happy with this. I don't know how many hours I spent on YouTube within about a 3-month period, just catching up on every channel that I'd ever watched, and then found a few more that just dove into how awesome of a knife this is. And now I'm pretty much convinced after my first couple of months, this has got to be one of the very best EDC folding knives a person could ever choose. So if you haven't, check out my new EDC knife video where I talk about why I picked each of these and the purpose of having 3 knives instead of just the one, because the Manix 2 can hold up to a lot, but having these extras around makes me feel pretty confident that I can handle anything. But nonetheless, great knife, super happy with it, super happy to be able to give this such a glowing review, and hopefully we'll be able to give it some better ones in the future. So keep an eye out for the updated reviews. For now, this is the Hard On Gear channel signing off.